Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful few days since I've last seen you. For some of you, it won't have been that long. You would have caught me on FPL Therapy yesterday with Ross, and the podcast went fantastically well, and I loved filming it. There will be a short section on that later. However, for now, I promised you an announcement on Wednesday, so it is an announcement you're going to get. If you have seen my DMs, and if you had access to my DMs over the past few weeks and months, you would have noticed a recurring theme, a particular request which has come again and again and again. And considering I'm talking about my DMs, I thought I would show you one before we launch the new project. I am absolutely privileged to receive DMs like this on a consistent basis. However, I don't ever show you my DMs, and I've never done anything of the sort. So why am I showing you this one? Well, these are the type of people that you're going to be associating with in our community group. This guy is taking time out of his day to send a message as lovely and as kind as this. He does not need to do that. I'm going to be producing the videos all the same, but he's gone out of his way and he's done it. You can also see that he has a desire to do well at FPL, to enjoy the game, to learn more about the game, to discuss the game, as do I, and as I'm sure so many of you do as well. I will explain the community group, the WhatsApp group, deeper when I get to that section. But I just wanted to show you the type of people that you could meet in there, because this is not just about FPL. I am not launching this project just so that we can talk more about FPL. Of course, that is part of it, right? I want us to all get better at the game, all learn off each other, and help each other week on week on week to make better and better decisions and climb up those rankings. But as I will show you when I get back to the slide, specifically the platinum side, this is not just about FPL. This is about fostering relationships for all of us, which improve the quality of our life in so many different ways. It's quite evident that we managed to build a brilliant community in such a short space of time. When I started YouTube, I had no intention of building a project such as this. Then when the idea came across my mind, I had no intention of producing it so early. I thought it would be launched in the summer and then we would go from there. However, through the constant support in the comments particularly, and the wonderful DMs I've received, and the request for something specifically like this, I thought it was honestly wrong for me not to start it, and it was a missed opportunity for all of us should I not. So I present to you the 3 tiers and the launch of my community, starting with the gold tier. The gold tier is for those of you who want to support the channel, kindly so, but have no real association with myself or other members past that, aside from the comment section. Speaking about the comment section, you will get 3rd tier priority replies. However, as you've seen, I've been pretty good with replying to most comments. It's just slightly harder when it comes to the team selection and solving your problems, and when there's a lot. However, with the 3rd tier priority replies, it should significantly bump you up the queue. In fact, it will significantly bump you up the queue, and as a result, you should pretty much always get a reply to your dilemma in the best way I possibly can. And I always take time to think about those, even if they are slightly longer. Like I said, this is largely a supporting tier, and the one that I'm really excited to launch is the Platinum and Diamond tier. The Platinum membership has arrived, and boy, does it look good. The recurring theme throughout the DM request that I got was, could I potentially start something whereby we have a group where we talk about football, specifically football and footballing analysis in a better and deeper fashion, and do the same when it comes to FPL, not just with regards to player picks, but also strategy and strategies that are more abstract that don't get spoken about. So I thought I would produce exactly that. But I decided to give you more, as you can see on the screen, because honestly, I just think there's so much value to be had here, and I wanted so many people to be able to access it that if I packed it into one tier, more people were likely to sign up and more people were likely to benefit and get serious value on their money. Hence why I priced it at only $4.99 for all of this. But let's break it down. The football analysis, I will give you an example, right? Because primarily there will be all the insights that I don't share online or largely with anyone else. Let's take Bournemouth West Ham. They played last night, so it's the perfect example. I disagreed with the usage of Carlos Soler and Lucas Paquetá in the same team. I remember a game last season where West Ham went away to Luton early in the season, and it had Alvarez at the base of the midfield, and in build-up, James Ward-Prowse and Lucas Paquetá would almost function as rotating 8s in a very fluid fashion to equally help with build-up. However, I remember watching Paquetá, and especially from that left side, he was so useful in this role. And then when he got into those advanced positions, given his quality, he was so good. Lucas Paquetá and Carlos Soler have a lot of the same functions in that side, or at least they should. Carlos Soler is equally, not maybe as good as Lucas Paquetá in build-up, but he's good in early stage build-up, and he's more than willing to drop in, and is almost instructed to do that by Lopetegui. He's also far more proficient and has a strike angle bias on that left-hand side when it comes to opening up his body and playing passes and shooting from that angle as opposed to on the right side. And Lucas Paquetá, whilst he has that to a lesser extent, certainly favours the left side. Lucas Paquetá was also playing a role where sometimes he was the right, sometimes he was occupying the 9-like role, and I didn't like that. And I thought one of them should be hooked for a striker, which is what Lopetegui ended up doing. So that's the type of analysis, and that's just one example from last night, which you could be getting if you are to join the group. Then, of course, the FPL help. There will be so many brilliant managers in there, aside from myself, and I'm not even calling myself a brilliant manager, who will be able to assist you with your issues. Fantasy Football have one for the ultras, and it's fantastic. There's such a good feel factor in there, especially when people do well and the points are flowing. But equally, someone will post a dilemma and other people will reply. And all of these guys in the community, you'll be like-minded, you will appreciate, I guess, the same content, and you will have somewhat similar view to the game. So you'll be able to appreciate and, I guess, derive more utility from their help. I think that is fantastic. You'll have so many people to bounce ideas off, and we can talk about more abstract strategies and finding the most marginal edges in which to exploit. And there's so much value to be gained from that, right? Even if the strategy fails, at least you would have opened your mind more, and that can certainly help you in life. And that is what I mean when it comes to discussions of all flavors. But not just that. I want to eventually get the community to a stage. I'm not expecting it to be a week one thing where people have developed really good relationships with each other. People are talking in the DMs, and as such, someone feels comfortable and confident enough to share maybe a personal bit of information with the group. For example, they've just had a kid, they've just launched a business, etc., etc., etc. Because nowadays, especially with the age of social media, people becoming more isolated, and the fact that in general, a lot of you guys, I've looked at the age range, are out of school. Fostering that sense of community and having loads of people around you who are like-minded and have similar interests isn't as easy. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you to do that, especially when it's coming from someone like myself who you already watch, and therefore there's that sense of trust there, and you know that in terms of what you're getting, it should be solid. And all the people that will join will also be really solid. Not just that, we all have goals, dreams, and desires. And I want to make sure that this is a network of people who are positive and motivating to almost inspire you to do better in life, and not just in terms of FPL. Now, you did not sign up for motivational speech every week. I completely appreciate that. Nor am I in a position to lecture you about how you should live your life. And it wasn't really intended to be that. It's more just a general feel-good factor about it. And also, can you imagine if we all captain Saka for that 18-pointer, what the chat would look like and how good it would feel for all of us to be getting those points? Absolutely magnificent. And then, of course, like I mentioned, you are going to be connecting with like-minded people, people who have similar interests, people who have similar morals. That is an opportunity for you to develop new friendships and develop business relationships, potentially, or new friendships at least. And even if they're online, they could certainly amplify the quality of your life. So there is a lot to be gained here, not just in terms of FPL, not just in terms of football or strategy, but outside of that and more in terms of your life and as people. Another thing that people have been heavily requesting come back is the threads. The reason I stopped them is that with YouTube, it became a little bit difficult to produce all that content. The threads by a mile take the most brain power. But now that I'll essentially be able to write them in article form, and I know that the whole audience that is reading them is very interested in them, because when you pay some money, even if it is for $99 a month, then you clearly have an interest because you're making that type of commitment, for which I'm very grateful. And I appreciate your love and support, and I'll be able to pour more and more effort knowing that you're paying for these threads. So that is another thing you'll get back. And with the threads, I can do something slightly different, and I can also include my different styles of writing to brighten it up, especially because I know that I can push the boundaries slightly more here. And you will, of course, get second tier priority replies, which basically guarantees you a reply on all of the comments. As you can see, there is a bunch of value packed in here. And I hope for $4.99 a month, a lot of you will think it's worth it. A lot of you have requested, so I imagine all of you guys will be in there anyway. Don't miss out, because this could be something so good, and who knows where we could take this. Maybe we get too many people and we have to close it off at some point. I've seen that with other communities, and I honestly think it's a good idea, because you don't want it to become overcrowded where it essentially loses its essence and what it was intended to be. So yeah, I'd suggest getting in there sooner rather than later, and I very much look forward to welcoming some of you. Finally, we have the diamond tier. Now, this is for those of you who want to associate with myself in a much closer fashion. Every single game week, we will have a 1-hour Q&A, but I'm not clock watching. I'm more than happy for it to go over. For example, if someone comes in the 59th minute and they have a question which requires a 7-minute answer, 15-minute answer, 20-minute answer, I will happily sit there and talk. You can obviously ask whatever question you want about FPL and your team, and we can go as abstract as you like. We can plan all the way out to Game Week 38 because there'll be far less of us, and even everyone in the tier won't be able to attend every single call. I will record it and send it so that you could always access this, but it will just allow you a lot more one-on-one access. Now, one thing with these tiers is you'll see there is no one-on-one access, and because that just requires so much time on my part, and I wouldn't want to sell it within these type of tiers. So this is the closest thing I thought I could give you within a certain time frame, and other people could benefit from it at the same time because they can be in the call. Now, let's just say one of you signs up to this diamond tier. I will genuinely sit with you more than happily, every single week for an hour. We can discuss your FPL team. If you'd like to discuss other things, I feel I'm qualified to do so. You trust me to do so. I will absolutely do that as well. So, like I said, this is for those who want a closer association, not just with myself, but also other members. For those of you who are signing up to this tier, you will all have, I guess, a larger appreciation for my content. Thus, you will have something in common and probably at least some other similarities in some fashion, allowing you to develop deeper and deeper relationships, both in terms of friendships and potentially business relationships. That's got nothing really to do with me. You foster such a good relationship with someone that you feel like doing that, then absolutely fantastic. Also, what about just the networking aspect, right? Someone works in marketing, this other guy needs a marketer or a job in marketing. Well, there's a chance that happens. A lot of the people, for example, that I expect to join, just a proportion of them work in London, work in the city. That could help you out. So that's essentially what I wanted to offer you here. A far deeper access to myself and the way I think about FPL and everything associated with that, and your team, I guess, because you can ask a lot more now that you have some form of one-on-one access in the call, but also you can develop even deeper relationships with others, and you will have an exclusive Diamond group chat, as well as the one which Diamonds and Platinums will share together. First tier priority replies guaranteeing you'll reply pretty much to every comment on the video, and of course, all the previous perks from the other tiers. I'm absolutely delighted to be launching this. I cannot wait to see those of you in there. And with nothing else needing to be said, let's hop into the content for everything you need to know. Actually, before we do, last thing from me, I'm genuinely so excited about this, especially the fact that we can have a community where we're not just going to improve ourselves at FPL, but also in terms of the way we do football and in life. I'm absolutely delighted, excited, and very grateful that I've been given this opportunity through your support, essentially, and your. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in there. Back to the football and back to FPL. The top two for captaincy this week will be Mohamed Salah and Cole Palmer. Usually, and many of the weeks gone by, it's been three candidates at least: Mohamed Salah, Cole Palmer, and Bukayo Saka, with some differentials sprinkled in there. For example, Alexander Isak at home to Leicester is what some of you went for last week. However, it's a slightly strange game week. I don't even love the Palmer or Salah captaincy for reasons I will discuss. I do have a preference, which I will share, of course, but there really doesn't even seem to be one differential standout pick. For example, I was really looking at trying to make a very aggressive move to captain someone who most people wouldn't even own, or at least with some form of a differential, and wasn't one of these two. But I thought maybe Isak's the best one, but he's away to Ipswich, and I don't think it's great and enough for me to captain him over Salah or Palmer. And to be honest, there's no one else really. So it's going to be these two, and let's hop into the analysis. It will be slightly shorter for the reasons that I don't like either of them as much as I have done in the past, but I shall still aim to give you as much value as possible and cover what I think needs to be covered. Firstly, these type of games, these transition-heavy games where teams press Liverpool high, they're built for that midfield, that specific Liverpool midfield. Bosley and Jones in particular, and Gravenberch I put in brackets because given he's playing in the pivot, he has less ball-carrying responsibility, I would say, but on the half turn when he explodes out of there, absolutely magnificent. He makes a lot of those runs, essentially, but now he just passes a little bit more and a little bit earlier as a result of his position and role within the side. So I think Liverpool could really hurt Spurs in transition. They've got fantastic carriers across the pitch in Szoboszlai and Jones. You expect only one to play with McAllister coming back into the side, which is actually interesting. I quite like Szoboszlai in that deeper role at times, but I imagine McAllister comes back into the side. So from the midfield, at least, you can expect a good performance and one which certainly suits their stylistic nature. This is a bit of a niche piece of analysis, but I guess that's what you come here for at times. Kulusevski started in a wide area against Manchester City. He also started in a wide area against Southampton, and that means Maddison plays in the middle. Kulusevski, I would say, has better ball retention than Maddison. So there's that. The other thing is, Maddison, I would say, is more of a natural creative. And he has the Bruno gene to an extent where he is more willing to play those slightly higher risk passes. I wouldn't say to the extent Bruno does, but he certainly has that in them. So then you have those turnovers and quick transitions. As a result, he's also a little bit less physical than Kulusevski, right? So for all of those reasons, I can see more transitions and more turnovers. And that for Salah, I think is brilliant because the volume of opportunities rises, and that's what you really want. You want Mohamed Salah on the end of those transitions, and against this particular Spurs side, he could really hurt them in that fashion. So that's something to consider there, albeit slightly niche. Thirdly, is his ceiling actually higher than Palmer's now? One thing we've seen with Palmer is definitely a reduction in goal threat, regardless of the fact that he's put up an 18-pointer and a 14-pointer in 2 of the last 4 weeks. 2 of those goals were penalties and 1 was a screamer from outside the box. But in terms of his open play goal threat, I think since teams have started to approach him in a different manner, like teams have started to approach Liverpool in a different manner with the way that Newcastle and Fulham have jumped Gravenberch when he receives in the pivot, or at least cut the circulation into him, forcing diagonals. I think teams have figured out that this is a somewhat optimal route. Thus, I wouldn't be surprised if it is a true statement that Salah has a higher ceiling, and you always want that with captaincy. Then there's the more obvious things, which I left for last. The high line, which Salah can exploit pretty much better than anyone, even though he is a wide player. Spurs' high press, you can play through that. Liverpool will look to play through that. They have some of the most press resistance players in the league in terms of Trent and Van Dijk. And the other thing with Trent is go high against Trent, bang, one pass and they're in, right? And that's something that no one else really has in the league. And even Van Dijk with his diagonals, let alone his press resistance. Volume transitions in the game, which I spoke about, which is just going to be a natural thing in this game because Spurs love a bit of basketball, and all you need to do is watch the Chelsea game to know how they're going to play. And then the centre-back injuries. No Mickey van der Ven, no recovery pace, or not that recovery pace, for a fixture which will have so many transitions because Spurs simply won't be able to dominate the ball, especially when Liverpool get more aggressive with their press. And Spurs don't build with a 3-2, they build 4. Well, more so a 2, actually, when like a 2-1 when one of their 8s will drop in at times and one of the 6 essentially will drop in the 2-1 build-up with the fullbacks pushed on in those somewhat inverted positions. As a result, against Liverpool's 4-2-4 high press, I can see a few turnovers there, and that being a route to points for Salah and just in general for Liverpool, a way for them to score goals. However, the reasons I don't love it is because, one, there's no Konate, and I think that creates a whole negative effect on the whole side. Not only do you account for the defensive capabilities that he possesses and how that lowers Liverpool's ceiling and floor of their defensive performances, but also that has implications on their attack because maybe you have to defend a little bit more as a result. Maybe you have to be slightly more cautious. Maybe Trent can't go as high because there's not the same channel defender, not the same type of channel defender as Ibrahim Konate, and there's definitely not, right? So that's one thing. They form a little bit as well. Drew against Fulham, drew against Newcastle, had the postponement in the middle of that. So they haven't won in a while, right, in the league, especially considering the amount of games. They haven't won in 4 games. But that's something to keep in your mind. The other thing is it's Spurs. There's a lot of talent in that side. Yeah, sure, I said that if Kulusevski plays wide and Maddison in the middle, I think that's decent and better for Liverpool. But that doesn't mean either of them in those 2 positions aren't quality, because they absolutely are. Son Heung-min, whilst I don't really love Dominic Solanke in the side, still a good player. Others, right? Pedro Porro as an example. And Jed Spence had a good game. Like, for example, people say, oh, Jed Spence versus Mohamed Salah, but he had a very good game against Southampton, and he's clearly worked very hard to get back in the side. And I imagine Ange wouldn't put him in there if he wasn't ready and deserving of it. Ange really doesn't seem like that type. You have to respect the quality they have, especially considering it's at Spurs. So that's my overall assessment of Mohamed Salah. One thing I noticed as well, it's so much harder to do analysis in this format when I'm recording for you guys, as opposed to when I was with Ross, everything flowed so much easier. I wonder why that is. Maybe because I don't have to hold this, and soon I won't be holding this after realizing how much easier it is to talk with a mic stand. So you won't have to complain about that. But for now, let's move on to Cole Palmer, and then we can discuss the rankings and my preference between the two. When I say the many systems, I'm really talking about the small variations Maresca has between all of them. As an example, will he utilize something similar to last game, whereby Cucurella inverts, but inverts in a slightly narrower left 8 type of role, and we form a diamond in midfield? Or we form a diamond in midfield like we did against Leicester, and Cucurella really holds the width as opposed to entering left 8 zones, whereby he's not able to access the same zone that he scored the goal from, or the same type of opportunity? Will he use a system like he did against Newcastle, where Enzo really is the left 8, Palmer really is the right 8? Palmer plays in what I would say is his best position. Like I said, there are so many variations, and I haven't even talked about variations in build-up, Lee Work, central centre-back or left centre-back, Gusto and how he's used, what if he inverts into the pivot or into the 8, and then where does Palmer go and where does Enzo go, and how does the left-back function, because there'll be Renato Vega, who's a different profile to Cucurella. There are so many systems to consider. So I'm not really going to try and guess what he can do. But the one thing I'm confident in is that he'll probably get it right, because he has done so throughout the season. Very, very, very competent manager, my manager. But if I absolutely had to bet, I don't think he plays right 8, Palmer. I was surprised that he didn't play that against Brentford. I was surprised that essentially against a guy who are going to be so intense with their pressing, you don't give him his normal functioning area. And the other thing is, when he plays at the top end diamond, he certainly tends more to that left-hand side, given the type of role the inverted fullback is playing on that side, right? So that's one thing to consider, and one reason I'm not so bullish. On one hand, you have Everton's 4-5-1, which was very compact in the middle, and certainly made it somewhat difficult for Arsenal. In terms of their creativity, there was a huge reliance on Saka, so out to in, which is not as good for Palmer. But we don't have a Saka, right? And most people don't. So we'll in general try to create in a different way. But there is the note to be made that it's just not as easy creating through the middle, because you can't get the space between the lines, right? That's one thing. Even punching the ball through there or driving through there is very difficult. You look at the Leicester game against Newcastle, right? Lack of compactness. Joel Linton found himself between the lines. So did Bruno G. But Cole Palmer's going to struggle to do that this game. Probably have to come outside of those two lines. And who knows, maybe he helps in earlier stage build-up, albeit with advanced territory on the pitch. Okay. However, Martin Odegaard, if he had a better game, how much damage could he have done to Everton? One thing that we saw against Brentford is Chelsea were very, very good at pressing high. What if we do that to Everton? Fulham did it somewhat. They leveraged their aggression and physicality, whereby Everton just went long a lot. And when they did, we couldn't. Fulham could recycle pretty quickly, get on the ball. And in those transitional type of moments, could we hurt Everton quite quickly if they're not able to get back into their shape? Maybe. Going back to the Odegaard point, if Palmer was to function in that Arsenal side, had the chance that Odegaard had, because he certainly had a few, and they have similarities in the sense left footer playing that right half space, and they're definitely quite fluid, and they have good interactions with whoever the player or the winger is on the right side, for example, Madueke. Will he be able to generate returns from there, and should he have a decent volume of opportunities? Yeah. So there's that. There's a lot to consider, and I would say there's a lot of unknowns associated with this game. Everton are also in form, and Goodison's a tough place to go. I was initially on Palmer. Then, as of yesterday, I was on Salah by the evening, and I've concluded that I'm going to go for Mohamed Salah. Honestly, there's really not that much in it. I think I'm just going to trust the fact that in terms of the conditions that Spurs present, they certainly seem to be more optimal. And when there's so many unknowns attached with Everton, I'm not exactly sure how the Palmer game will play out. I think it's safer to go with Salah. I think, as I've expressed, he probably has a higher ceiling. Thus, I'm going there. This piece of analysis was probably slightly more scrambled than usual, because I think there are so many unknowns and it's hard to predict. But I wanted to give my best go as to showing you what I think could happen. So yeah, that's how I see it. And I very, very, very likely will be going for Mohamed Salah. What should you be doing with Matthias Cunha, the man who is set to be banned as a result of his actions following the Ipswich game? Now, following the press release from the FA spokesperson, he has until Thursday, which is the day after a lot of you will be watching it, or the day of that you're watching it, the 19th of December, to respond, and is looking at a decent sized ban for the actions that he committed. However, there is something I would like to show you first. This tweet from FPL Mark is absolutely brilliant and provides us with a lot of value. He questions whether Cunha will be available in Game Week 17, and he refers to 3 somewhat recent players who have been faced with misconduct charges or others of sorts, which have resulted them receiving a ban. Kudus had until the 24th, and he was postponed until the 6th. Gibbs White the 27th, and then received it on the 18th, and Benson on the 19th, and it almost took a whole month for him to receive it. So that's likely to be the case with Cunha, which means he should be available for Leicester away. Now, if he is away at Leicester and available, then, especially considering he'll be under a new manager balance, it can't really get any worse than it previously was. And he'll probably know this is going to be his last game for a while, or at least one of the last games for a while. I can imagine he'll be really, really up for it. I wouldn't be selling. In pretty much no case would I be selling. However, if the news is to come that he's going to get slapped with a ban and he's out of this fixture, if for whatever reason you want to sell him and you don't trust Wolves and you really want Isak this week, then here are some potential replacements. Alexander Isak, who we discussed at greater length later, for me, largely a set and forget for the reasons I discussed later until game week 25. And if there's one player I'd be looking at getting, it would certainly be him, especially because he's not a million miles away in terms of the price. Now it's up to about 1.5, 1.6, but it really would be worth it for an asset like Alexander Isak, in my opinion, in most cases. And we'll come on to that later. If not him, if you can't stretch there for whatever reason, don't own this guy, Nicholas Jackson. Now, he probably gets one rest, but your squad should have enough depth, considering you likely don't own Haaland, for you to be able to cope with that and just play like a Rodgers or an AMAD or Enzo, which we're going to come on to in the next section. And if you're fine with that one benching, he's honestly a potential season keep. I looked at the fixtures and they never get bad until I think it is game week 35. And even then, if we're flying and competing for the league, would you really sell our number 9? Probably not. So I'm really bullish on what Nicholas Jackson can do outside of that one potential, which I do think he'll get for Christopher Nkunku sooner rather than later, given the congestion of the fixture period and just keeping everyone happy. If you want to go there, if you've got both of them and now you want the cheaper option, I'm not going to discuss João Pedro because a lot of you already own him, and I think he's an entirely different option to all of these given the price point, but very good in his own right. Rasmus Højlund, it would be a very differential pick. The fixtures are there, however. For me, it's just one, the expected minute. Does he get taken off a little bit early, even though I don't think Amorim really rates Xerxes as the 9. Definitely wants a channel runner similar to Guy Corres, and Højlund certainly is that on a player I really, really like. But it's more so the ceiling and the floor, to be honest with him, given United's patterns of play at the moment and the fact that they're not creating too many chances, at least from settled possession. So I would probably be avoiding, but not the worst differential in the world. Jimenez, again, I would be avoiding as well. One, the expected minutes will never be there because, one, he could get replaced by Muniz for a game in terms of rotation, but also when he does play, only like 60, 70 minutes. I don't think that's good enough every single game. You have the likes of Alexander Isak, Nicholas Jackson. And I know he's cheaper, but when Chris Wood exists at not too much more expensive of a price, I would take the minutes of Wood. Jean-Philippe Mateta is an interesting. You could go early. I don't think Arsenal at home is the end of the world. It's not great, right? They're arguably the best defense in the league, so it's not great. But going early and potentially catching some value before everyone else is able to get there is something. However, you have to monitor his minutes with Eddie Nketiah certainly banging on the door. And Palace paid a lot for him, so he can't just rot on the bench. And then Chris Wood, I think he's probably the safest one. Good price, certainly a downgrade will get you some cash out of Cunha to spend elsewhere, and you might need that. Who knows how things change? The other thing is he's in such good form. The fixtures are decent, and the system is really built for him to score. And not that he doesn't do anything else; he does a lot of other things for the side. But as you've seen, it really is primed for him to score. So those would be my favorite replacements if you are to do that, and if he is to receive a ban. Isak, Jackson, and then probably Chris Wood. One of the more popular dilemmas this week is AMAD Diallo versus Enzo Fernandes versus Morgan Rodgers, and I thought that we would look at this in 2 different parts. Firstly, from a strategic perspective, and that is quite damning for Enzo Fernandes. Why? Well, you likely own Cole Palmer. A lot of you very likely own Cole Palmer, if not 90% upwards. Okay? You potentially also own Nicholas Jackson. Let's say 30% of you, right? And 30% of the 90, which would be about 27% of you which own both, and 90% of you Cole Palmer. Okay? And if you don't own Nicholas Jackson, maybe you're looking at bringing him in. He's great regardless, so he should be there or knocking on your door for the considerable future, if not permanently. That would mean you would hold either double or triple Chelsea attack. And if you are to own double, you'd be owning both of the 8s. That is a lot of risk to take on. What happens when Chelsea have a bad game? Which, to be fair, we really shouldn't, considering the run we've got and how well we're playing. But what if that happens? What if we win, but it's just one of those cagey wins and it's not really the 8s that score? What type of player is Enzo Fernandes? Is he someone who's going to be getting a lot of goals? Probably not. And we discussed this slightly later. You are massively increasing the risk profile of your team, especially if you have triple attack. Another thing is you're almost upping your ceiling because you're constantly taking away bonus points from yourself. Now, all of your players can't access 3 bonus points. Now, all of your players can't even access 2 bonus points. Not realistically. Very unlikely they finish the same amount like Madueke and Palmer did. So you're taking that away from yourself and you're introducing so much more risk and somewhat unnecessarily. Okay, there are so many other good options. like AMAD and Rodgers, that if you have Enzo or if you have Palmer and Jackson especially, do you really need to triple up? I think not. Right? And tripling up, you're pretty much requiring Chelsea to score a minimum of 2 goals every game for you to really justify it, and it has to be those 3 involved. Otherwise, if one of them's not involved, that's instant black. So yeah, I personally just think if you like Palmer and Jackson works wonderfully as a combination in most squad structures, and just leave Enzo alone. I'll start with him as a player, considering I'm on him. In isolation, he's fine, right, as an asset, and that's why a lot of you brought him in. I'm also thinking about general structuring and in terms of his competition. He's taking up really good position. For example, he played on the right side of the diamond, but was really entering the like zones and even the box at times. However, look at the goals he scored this season. Brilliant strike against Villa, top weak foot strike against Spurs, and a header from about 6 yards where he followed the shot or the header from Jackson. Those aren't really goals which I think are completely replicable for most players, just in general, right? And he also isn't really the type to be one-on-one with the keeper and finish it because he's not going to get in those positions. And like I said, those goals that he scored are difficult to replicate. And he doesn't have the avenues to goals that others have. Like, for example, Saka has so many. Other strikers have so many. Jackson has quite a few. Not as many as other strikers, but quite a few. So I just think in terms of your ceiling, it's somewhat capped as a result. And even your floor, you're playing with a bit of risk and playing with a bit of fire. So for me, he's not the optimal cheap option. So who is out of AMAD and Rodgers? And I really, really, really like both. So I'm not going to disagree with either one that you go for. AMAD might be the only player in that entire squad who I would say is the correct profile for that number 10 role. You could argue it was Mason Mount, but now what AMAD can do is what many of them can't. He can stretch that last line, and he's got the pace and behind. He's got the ball carrying ability. But he's also comfortable in small spaces. Back to goal, he's fine if you want to put it into him, and he can function in the slightly deeper areas. Pretty much no one else in that Man United squad can do that. Rashford and Garnacho are runners, but we've obviously seen controversy surrounding them. Mason Mount's injured. Bruno obviously takes roles, but we're not discussing him at the moment. And you need that type of Bruno profile in there anyway, right? And arguably the optimal one now is AMAD, Bruno, and Højlund, especially with how well Amad Diallo is playing. Form and momentum is quite a thing. And if a player is able to sustain it, and he seems like he's got a confidence, even after the game, the way he went and the humility with the confidence combined, I really like what I see from the guy. And the fixture there, he's had the form already. I think it's really just kicked up a gear because of his performance in the Manchester derby and the fact that he has the output to show for it. But for me, there's nothing bad I say about this move. The only thing is the expected minutes relating to the position. What if he gets moved back to wing back? And yeah, fair enough. Good thing is he presses so aggressively, so at least he could be in and around those areas when those goals are happening. But you don't want a midfielder playing at wing back in your FPL side, right? But it's not the end of the world, especially considering the likely minutes he plays now in the 10 role and in general the quality and the form of the player. So as I expressed on FPL Therapy, big fan. Rodgers, I really like him, and I like him a lot more than I think most people do. And I still think people are lack of credit. Positioning isn't an issue. Whether Villa play in the back 3 and he plays on the right side as the right side of 10, or whether Villa play at the 4, Unai Emery's certainly shown a reluctance to play him in one of those wider areas, but rather he partners the striker up top as a second striker type of role. Unai Emery loves him, and he'll be very, very good for minutes. And in terms of his attacking talent to actually generate goals and assists for us, it's there. He's such a good attacking talent, right? And definitely better than Enzo in that regard. So for me, when he has the longevity of fixtures as well, and as I mentioned here, you guys all have longevity of fixtures, I would also have him above Enzo. Now, which one you should go for out of AMAD and Rodgers is difficult, really, really difficult. And I don't really have too much of an opinion on it, and I don't just want to give one for the sake of it. I think they're both good. I don't think anyone can really say bad decision. Personally, I have this security with Rodgers at the moment that I really like. But AMAD probably has got a bit of the higher ceiling. I would say the safer pick is Rodgers. The more explosive one, with more risk attached as well, is AMAD Diallo. 3 sections have largely been ever present in everything in forward section, which we sort of had earlier, but not as in with as much focus on them as usual. The defender section, which whilst there is one, it's only on one team, and the Bruno and Bryan section, which is the only one which has really stood the test of time and remained. However, this time it's with a different take, completely different take. In the weeks gone by, I have advocated for the sell of both of them. However, I've changed my perspective, and I think fairly so. When I advocated for the sale of Bruno Fernandes, he had Everton at home, followed by Arsenal away, Forest at home, and City away. That is a very difficult fixture run, especially when Amorim not only hinted but suggested he could arguably be far better in the pivot, and then he goes to play at 10 against Everton. So I think it was a completely fair argument for me to be like, okay, this is a guy you should sell, especially considering the funds he was taking up. However, now that those 4 games have passed, now that he's managed to retain form, at least in terms of output, now that United are on definitely a bit of a bounce and have a bit of a good factor about them after a huge win at the Etihad, the fact that Amarin's shown that he's willing to get rid of players who are not serving the environment in the way he thinks is best, you can expect some form of stability, I would say, with United's results. Just some, because you never know with those lot at the moment for the last 10 years, I would say. And Bruno could keep returning with those fixtures that he has. So I'm far, far, far more open to keeping him now. There's only one thing putting me off, and we will discuss that later. Bryan and Mbeumo equally has got rid of some of the worst fixtures, including Chelsea away. Now, the thing with him is, even against Chelsea, he walks away with a 9-pointer. So little in the game. The performance was certainly not one which reflected the 9-pointer. However, if you are to sell him, who do you buy? Because at that price tag in the midfield, so few options. Okay, you could still go for Bowen and Kudus, but they don't fixture on which lasts particularly long. We'll speak about Antoine Semenyo in a minute. Do you want to really go to a structure where you have 2 cheap midfielders plus João Pedro? Example, picking up one of the ones we just spoke about. Maybe not, right? But if you did want to keep him, I think it's fine because I don't think the fixtures are as bad as they look on the FDR or they're being made out to be. One of the main reasons for that, and what I'm giving a lot of weight to, is Nottingham Forest, Brentford's ability at home, right, to score goals, and for him specifically to generate returns. So even if he's playing in those wide areas, the game is so chaotic, somewhat basketball in it, and he's of such a high quality as a player that within those conditions, even though he's not got the optimal ones from a positional standpoint, he's still able to deliver and return. Right. Forest at home, one of the better defenses in the league, easily one of the best. But it's at home, and then it's an away fixture, and then it's Arsenal at home, and it's Brighton away, right? So like that is a fixture to an extent to have some joy, at least a bit more of an open game, especially if Brighton push their fullbacks on those transitional moments that Palace had as well. Brentford could certainly hurt them, and then it's Arsenal at home. Okay, fine, best defense in the league. At least it's at home. Then it's Southampton away. Okay, Southampton, good fixture. Then it's City at home and Liverpool at home. And again, I'm resting on the fact that it's at home. And if after Southampton you want to sell him for like Eze, who maybe has found some form by then, by all means go and do it. For me, it's just due to the lack of replacements why I'm more comfortable in holding him and the fundamentals he holds, even if it's not the positional one or the positional variable currently. There's one other thing which puts me off, however, and it's the same thing associated with Bruno, which we will discuss in a later section. The latest section in reference has arrived so soon. I said I would touch on Alexander Isak, and I shall do so. So many of you guys don't own him. I was surprised at how low his effective ownership was when we arrived at Newcastle for Leicester's visit. It was around 33%. It's only a third of you, and thus I thought I would sell him a little bit more to you, and it links into the section we spoke about. With the introduction of the assistant managership, it's far easier to facilitate the likes of Alexander Isak because you don't need Erling Haaland. That's the main thing, right? It becomes much harder to justify a £50 million asset who's not as captainable or even close to as he was in the past. There's better options at the same time, and therefore you have more money to spend, which is good. And we'll discuss the template a little bit more in the next section, and that is, to put it mildly, as it says on the screen. There's that discussion about him and Jackson there. Jackson we touched on earlier, but again, this guy, he's a better player than most of those forwards. Chris Wood may be putting up exceptional numbers, and he's a very good player, and he's probably still underrated, but he's not a better player than Alexander Isak. So he always has that talent going for him and ability to generate returns resulting of that. Playing in a good team, who are certainly improving. Their coach is certainly adaptable. For example, the move for Bruno G into an 8 as opposed to playing as a 6. Good for him. Anthony Gordon on that left side, playing much better. Good for him. Good for the team in general. And then he's got the fundamentals. He's got the minutes, he's got the positions, he's got the role, he's got the penalties. It's brilliant. And if you don't go there, my issue is there's no one else to compete. Even Jackson doesn't hold the fundamentals that Alexander Isak does, right? But how do you compete with him? And there's not other spots to exploit because, as we've mentioned in the last section, there's not the midfielders that I would say are of a caliber who even at a cheaper price, like a 7.5, can really compete with this guy. There's just no standout options in that category. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to price whatever you need within reason to get here. I say this is where Bruno and Bryan come into the equation because for some people, given their team values or the structure of their teams, Bruno and Bryan block Alexander Isak. So then the question becomes, tell the guys that I just told you, in most cases, not to sell for him. And the answer is yes. I said not to sell them because I was merely advocating for squads that already have Isak and hold them as well. But if it's a straight toss up and you're in the somewhat unfortunate position that you could only get one of the two, I would get Alexander Isak for the reasons I just discussed. I'm not sure those two guys can put up reliably the same level of output as him. He makes me feel a lot safer as a manager because the fixtures are probably slightly better. And also, he's a forward. They're better on the bonus system this year. And he's got better fundamentals than both. Both have somewhat, well, to an extent, positional issues. Bruno in the pivot and potentially at times, and then Mbeumo wide. Moving on to another player, and it might be time to say adios to Antoine Semenyo. He's taken off as a precaution during the game against West Ham with a hamstring injury of sorts. The thing is, with hamstrings, you don't really want to risk with them because sort of that could be a long-term injury. Iraola seems to definitely be someone to manage him well, given he's taken him off at 0-0 in that type of game, right, considering the game state. His finishing has also been below par this season, and has been that for the whole season. Even the goals he's racked up have been resultant of the Dango Atara crosses primarily, as opposed to good finishes for him. And he had a couple chances against West Ham, and again, didn't take them. Now you look at the fixtures, and originally when you look at them, okay, not so bad. But now, Man United away, with how compact that United side is under AMAD, and the low risk game model, which we alluded to and spoke about in the previous video, tough. Palace, again, so much welcome back, similar system to United to an extent. And in general, a side that's really on the up and has good players. Put them away. I wax lyrical about them on FPL Therapy, and they're one of the better defenses, right? And they've got the physicality to boast as well to make it really, really tough. And therefore, maybe the high press doesn't work as well, given they've also got centre backs who are decent on the ball, albeit it's not too much of a big deal. And then again, Everton. Look, they just kept a clean sheet at Arsenal and did so, I wouldn't say with relative ease, but it wasn't the hardest game that those guys have ever played in their life. The fixtures now look pretty poor compared to what they look like before. And with the cheaper options presented earlier, with potential upgrades into Bruno, Bryan, should you fancy it, I think it is time to say adios to Antoine Semenyo. This is a still image of my appearance on FPL Therapy, which is Ross's FPL Raptors podcast. And I thought we had a fantastic episode, and it was one which so many people seem to enjoy in the comments. If you have not watched it, there's a lot of football analysis, match analysis. We talk about the assistant manager chip, we talk about our teams, there's some good fun in there as well. And in general, Ross was such a good host. He's a great guy as well. So if you don't watch this, at least go and check out his channel. I really do think it's worth it. But for those of you who like my match analysis, I really would consider going to watch this. The other thing is, it was a lot easier to record in this sense, opposed to the dynamic that I have with you now. Maybe, like I said, it's because I'm holding the mic, but it just felt more natural and more structured in my thoughts and being able to give my insights, especially compared to today as well. So I would definitely recommend going to check that out. And that is the special bit of content I promised for you on Tuesday. The announcement with the community launch was the Wednesday one, and then Friday you shall see that fairly soon. For reference, I will link in the description so you don't have to go and search for it. The last thing is to do with planning, because a lot of you won't be looking to bring in these assets in this week, and this is going to be a short version of this. I just thought it was very important to include it, and then I will touch on it pretty much the exact same side in solving your problems later. But this is more so for the planners. Look at the template that's established itself, and for good reason. They're brilliant assets, and they work in the current game state. Salah, Saka, Isak / Jackson, Cunha, and then Bruno / Bowen, or Mbeumo and Gabriel. Quite expensive, that call, right? And adding Virgil van Dijk or Trent to it requires an extra 2 or 2.5 million on top of those 4.5 defenders, of which there are quite a few. Munoz, Robinson, and Hall, all around that price tag. And can you really justify it? Do Virgil van Dijk and Trent have both the clean sheet likelihoods in abundance compared to those two, and also the attacking threat? No, they don't. Not with Konate out. So for me, with the cheaper defenders holding much more value in relative sense, what they do in most years, due to the philosophical shifts of the managers, where they are playing aggressive and attacking style, and the attacking talent in the league, I would absolutely be comfortable fading. And I have no intention now of getting a level defender. Initially I did, but now I think, especially with the usage of the system manager chip in 24, having those free transfers is so much more important. And yeah, sure, you could say, okay, fine, but I'm going to prepare for the double like this. I would argue you're going to miss out on opportunities potentially through the money you spend here that you can't spend in your attack line, and it will make, when you need to get funds out, it will make it hard, I think, going down the line into the managership, especially because slot will be like 1.5. You'll block yourself from that potentially anyway. And the other thing is, with the cheaper defenders, or Robinson and yours, if they do well and they increase in value, it makes your life even that much harder if you're looking to get the money out of this Liverpool defender. Finally, moving on to the fixtures, and like I said, we are going to go back to this in solving your problems in detail, because I think it deserves it. But this was mainly for the planners. You're not going to buy him for Tottenham away, right? And then Nottingham Forest away and Brentford away, difficult. Okay, fine. Forest slightly more of a defensive side. Liverpool have more of the ball, but it's a hard place to go. It's a really hard place to go. So there's that. And then, therefore, the entry point will be Leicester, West Ham, or it'll be Leicester, or really Leicester at home, West Ham away, Man United at home. Leicester at home is great. I have nothing negative to say about it. West Ham away. Firstly, it's away. Secondly, there'll be no Konate. Look at my rhyming. That's tough as it is, right? An away fixture without Konate is tough without as it is. But consider the firepower they've got. And if Lopetegui gets it right on the day with his personnel selection and the system, between Bowen, Kudus, Somerville, Paquetá, there's a lot to contend with, not to mention like a full crew up top as well. So that's definitely not guaranteed clean sheet. And the Man United at home, I think it's okay style that Man United play. It's not one where they're accumulating too many chances at the moment. It's probably given a lack of time within it, but it's still Man United. They can still hurt you. They still have talent. And who knows if they picked up some form by them, again, without Konate, could be quite tough. So I think this might be somewhat of a facade, and I would definitely consider it in serious depth and give it massive consideration and understand the risk that is associated with this type of mood on betting that these guys are going to outscore the cheaper defenders isolation when they have such good fixtures like Robertson and Munoz and Hall do as a rotation, and also the attacking players that you maybe won't be able to access them, what you're blocking down the line. That is all she wrote for today's video, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, a bump up to 141k, a 15k green arrow, even though Bowen blanked, primarily resultant of the one increase bonus point Nicholas Jackson got and the one increase in Palmer's bonus, which gave me 2 for the captaincy, up to 1,009 points in total. If you did like the video, please do like the video. For all of you who are new around here following the subscriptions from FPL Therapy, I welcome you and I'm delighted to have you here, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I imagine you did if you got to this stage. Again, I think the community could be something that is so great for all of us. The link will be in the description. It'll be basically the first thing you see. And I look really, really, really forward to having so many of you in there. Thank you so much for the support as always. And I see you in the comment section and in the community. Goodbye, guys.